What's up guys, Dan Frullani here and welcome back to your new video. So today I would just like to show you a few photos that I'm shooting. Well, I'm gonna shoot. If you're watching this video, it means I've already shot the photos. I've already made a few videos where I talk about portrait lenses, or at least my favorite focal length for shooting portraits. So I seldom use something like a 35mm for portraits because I don't like it much. It's not my favorite. I prefer something that gives me more compression. Like for example, 50 is okay, but I prefer the 85 and up. Like 85, 135. So now I'll show you a couple of photos I shot with the 85mm, the RF 85mm f2. And now I want to show you some more photos with the same model with the EF 135mm f2 with the adapter. Now some more photos with the RF 85mm f2 with the sun, with the light coming from behind, of course with the lens hood to avoid any unpleasant flare. Now, the same with the light coming from behind the subject with the 135mm EF with the adapter, with the lens hood, of course. So I think it's time to wrap it up. Let's go to my studio. So you have seen a few photos shot on the Canon RF 85mm f2 and the 135mm EF f2. So what's the difference? Well, first of all, leave a comment down below, let me know what you think about it, and since you're there, hit the like button, subscribe if you ain't already, and check the links in the description to see all my gear stuff and things, my gear. And check the link to Epidemic Sound if you want 1 month of awesome music and great sound effects. 1 month for free. Alright, so what's the difference between these two lenses for portrait? Well, I believe they're both awesome, but they have their differences. Like the RF 85mm f2 was made for RF mount cameras, and I can use it on my Canon R6 without any adapter. And I can use it on the R6, on the R5, on the R7, on the R8 and so on. The EF 135mm f2 was made a long time ago for DSLRs. So in order to be able to use it on my Canon R6 or any RF mount camera, I need the adapter. Why do I like these lenses so much, and which one do I prefer? Well, as I mentioned earlier, and also in other videos, to shoot portraits, I like a focal length of 85mm and up. sometimes even 50. Like the Nifty 50 is not bad at all, just not my favorite, because I prefer the 85mm or the 135mm. Why? Because of the compression they give. The higher the number, the higher the compression, or the more the compression. Now let's see what happened according to the results of my photos. I shot in two different conditions, like one with bright sun, direct sun towards the subject from the front, and it was really harsh because it was noon, 12 o'clock or something like that. And both lenses handled it like perfectly, with good contrast, good colors, sharpness and everything. Then the second kind of shots with the subject with the light coming from behind. And let's say the 85mm performed beautifully without losing any contrast, any saturation or nothing. So it's just really good. The 135mm in these conditions with the light coming from behind the subject gave me totally different results. Positive or negative results. A little bit of both. How? Well, let's say I'm gonna start with the negative one. The 135mm tends to get some very bad flaring that most of the time is not really flattering on the subject. It's like a bubble. Plus, when shooting in these conditions with the subject and the sun coming from behind, we'll lose a lot of saturation, a lot of contrast, a little bit of everything. But here's the positive thing. Number one, using a lens hood, the flare, the bubble, wasn't a big deal. I mean, I can tell it's there in some of the shots, but it doesn't bother me much. It doesn't bother the image so much. Other thing is that thing that was supposed to be another negative thing, the loss of saturation and contrast. Well, almost all the shots I took in these conditions look incredible. Look at this, for example, raw, straight out of camera. I would use it even just like this without doing anything to it, but I would just add a tiny little bit of contrast and that's awesome. So what do you think about it? Again, leave a comment down below and hit the like button. Subscribe if you haven't already. But let's continue with the differences between these two lenses. The 85mm is stabilized. It has stabilization. The 135mm doesn't have it. Is that an issue? No. When I use it with my Canon R6, that's definitely not an issue, because the Canon R6 has IBIS and it works beautifully for photos. Now let's see another thing, the shallow depth of field, the bokeh in the background. They're both beautiful. I mean, if you don't see them side by side, if you don't see side by side a photo shot with the 85mm and another one shot of the 135mm, they're both beautiful. But when you compare them, you put them together, of course, even with the same aperture, the 135mm gives us more blur in the background. And also, the quality of the bokeh is far superior on the 135mm, because on the 85mm, the background tends to look a little bit crowded sometimes, a little bit digital somehow. This doesn't happen with the 135mm. It always looks buttery smooth and awesome. So, which one do I prefer? Well, isn't it obvious? If I have to choose between the RF 85mm f2 and the 135mm f2, I would definitely choose the 135mm for all the reasons I mentioned that I can tell you in one sentence. The 135mm has character. The RF 85mm is a new lens made specifically for RF mount cameras or R mount cameras, potato. But that doesn't change that it's still a kind of an entry-level lens. So it's good, but to a certain extent. On the other side, the 135mm is a much older lens, but as I said, it was made for professionals. And as I mentioned earlier, it has character. So it's true that the 85mm, when a source of light comes from behind the subject, performs beautifully. Yes, I totally agree. But honestly, I prefer the results from the 135mm because you can use its disadvantages in your favor to get particular shots with character. So I think it's not a lens for everybody, because first of all, you need to know it well, and you have to deal with some of the issues, like especially if you don't have stabilization in your camera, in-body stabilization, well, that might be an issue. With the Canon R6, that's not a problem. And then it's for creative people, creative photographers, willing to take a risk to get some awesome shots and not just average, technically good shots. And also you have to be ready to deal with some flaring. That's a kind of flaring you can't play with much. You have to try to avoid it as much as possible. Like, first of all, using a lens hood, and second, use your eye, the viewfinder, the LCD screen, whatever. Do whatever it takes to avoid the flaring, to avoid that ugly bubble covering the subject, or at least make sure it doesn't compromise completely your shot. So, in the end, they're both good lenses, but the 135mm cost 3 times the price of the 85mm. So the 135 is a professional lens. The 85mm RF is not. I think I don't have anything else to say. Alright, I really hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, smash the like button and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Oh yeah!